As soon as I entered the gym and saw my reflection in the mirror, I realized that I should have stayed at home. Full-length mirror by the doorway. Untidy ponytail and big sweatshirt I'm still wearing. Too exhausted from yet another sleepless night, I appear to be a human version of a breakup playlist. Yet I had vowed to. I was going to perspire since this morning I had new habits, new energy, and a new me. I literally scanned my keycard at the front desk and made an effort not to. The auburn-haired girl stretching on a mat by the treadmills didn't resemble Jordan at all. Had sharp cheekbones, jet black hair, and the coldest farewell I've ever heard, not functioning anymore. Like if we hadn't created 2 years of memories together. As though I hadn't murmured my love for her into her next darkness 1,000 times. Indeed, I was here to see seeing people, not so much for cardio. Every time I rolled over in bed and searched for someone who wasn't there, she was in every song, on every corner, and the gym was merely a diversion. It wasn't meant to hurt until it did. I felt someone enter my personal space, midway through my warm-up squats. Clothed, self-assured as though they belonged close to me. Your form is respectable, a voice remarked softly. And I'm laughing, but your knees are bending slightly. If you continue, you'll exhaust your quadriceps. I straightened, startled. I turned to face the voice's source and froze. No. She was taller than I had recalled, with long brown hair and a tan from spring break, with a smile on her lips that hadn't altered since high school, twisted into a high braid. Scarlett, I exhaled my in person, the ex's younger sister stated, crossing her arms. I didn't expect to see Kennedy. If you like this content, I could say the same thing in a whisper. If you would want to show your support for the channel in a unique way, click the thanks button below. It's the one with the dollar and heart sign symbol with super thanks. You can directly support the channel, enabling me to continue producing amazing content. Footage of you snatching my water bottle as though it would shield me. Don't you exercise at that time? Do you stalk all of your ex's siblings or just me? She dismissed me. Posh studio downtown. I'm not stalking. I'm just doing this. My mouth opened and closed. My back raised one eyebrow. Is the nearest gym to my place? I was fortunate to gaze at her. She looked lovely, wearing those seamless leggings that left nothing to see. I felt comfortable and confident. The imagination. And she wasn't observing me in the courteous, awkward way that you do. I kind of dated my sister, but she was staring at me as if I were something My throat became dry as I was ready to taste. What are you doing here? I asked the speaker, more defensive than I intended. I could have asked you the same question. I assumed you detested gyms, and some people adapt more quickly, others. Her tone grew slightly softer, causing my heart to race. Are you okay? Is it true that you're squatting in anger? Wouldn't I be? And you? I should have left the room because Kennedy Harper is only one lousy song away from hurling a dumbbell across the room. Took my belongings, went across town to another gym, and never returned. Instead, I returned to the mat, and Scarlett glanced at me. What do you obviously have? Thoughts on my form? You wish to assist me in becoming noticed? For a little moment, something flickered. She smirked, and there was surprise, amusement, and possibly something darker in her gaze. Kennedy, please show me. He went behind me, hands hovering just over my hips. What you had? I changed positions, and I squatted down again. Her voice, warm and low behind me. Keep your chest high, and push through your heels with her hands. Didn't come into contact with me, but I could sense their heat, tension, and every nerve. When I woke up from weeks of numbness, I breathed too quickly. Better, she replied, a smile curving at the corner of her lips, caught in my throat. Don't rush, though control is key. I said, you always were. She was a little impetuous and made fun of you for punching that vending machine your sophomore year because it was really hot at the granola bar, which was a low point in my academic career. Scarlett's brows narrowed as she asked, blinking naively. I'm simply claiming that you look nice in rage and that you're flirting with me. Am I incapable of flirting? Yes, I dated your sister. She claimed to soften her voice. But she didn't. Deserve you that silenced me, and I turned my head away, my hands quivering and my throat tight, enough to make me clench my fists. Please refrain from saying such things. Why doesn't she? Since it's true and complicated, I inquired. Only if you want it to be? Didn't respond. Neither did I, and we silently concluded the set. She noticed. Her hands never touched her breath closely enough for me to feel it on each repetition. When I rose up from the final, she leaned out and gently pulled my hoodie down from where it had ridden up, her fingers brushing the squat chest heaving. I winced because the skin above my hip felt too pleasant, not because it hurt. Thank you, I said, for the assistance at any moment. I'm here most days if you ever want a partner. And her eyes met mine. I stated this hastily, but it can't be true. She smiled slowly. I left the gym with legs that were still shaking, but it wasn't from the squats. Tell your body that the next time I touch you, from her, from whatever it was that this was becoming into. And I laid in bed that night, contemplating not. I didn't go back to Scarlet Heart and the way her voice sounded like gravity. But I did think of Jordan and everything I had lost. I persuaded myself that it was because I was sore that day, or the day following. My shoulders were tense and my thighs hurt. So I secretly wanted to, was fully aware of the reason I stayed at home. The Scarlet Heart had crept under my skin like heat, making it impossible to ignore. Additionally, I hadn't prepared myself to handle the aftermath yet, so I used those 2 days to tidy my apartment and rearrange before giving up and focusing on the ceiling. I even read the same passage from a book 3 times while using the spice rack. Discussed returning to therapy, which I had stopped 3 months into Jordan's relationship because I felt stable. What a farce. By the 3rd night, Scarlet not Jordan instead of the icy quiet of our Scarlet's voice in my ear and her fingers grazing the hem of my hoodie as if she owned the last chat. Time and realized exactly what it was doing to me. I knew I couldn't escape the gym when I woke up, hot and bewildered, indefinitely. So I dressed in my leggings, tied my hair up, and entered the room the following morning, as if I hadn't been reliving every word she spoke for the past 48 hours. The location was half full, music was blaring, mirrors were shining, and I looked around the room immediately. Edge. And then I noticed her in the low-waisted black sports bra in the weight room. Her smile struck me as she laughed while wearing leggings and a tight ponytail while wearing a trainer. I should have turned around, but she looked up locked, and it felt like a blow to the chest. She looked at me, then slowed her smile enough that I could feel my legs move before I allowed them to. "You're back," she said as I came to a stop next to her. That smirk tugged at the corners of her mouth. "I assumed you would head to a yoga studio or something less strenuous because I was busy, so I told the old-fashioned fib." She gave me a resistance band, but I wasn't afraid. It was a sore and scared combination, as if we had just resumed our conversation. "Warm up easily. I'm performing deadlifts in 10. Come along, Scarlet." Her eyes were keen, but her tone was relaxed. "We're just working out. Unless you want to." More than I could have imagined. "You're amazing that you didn't say no." I detested how much I could see her back flexing under her bra strap. But she turned and left without saying anything more. I detested the way my body was already warming up as a result of following. She was setting up at the deadlift station when I joined her, and her eyes were full of confidence because of course I did. "And composure, you're going to disregard the fact that this is strange." I inquired that you're drawn to me, or that I'm your ex's sister. Don't lie. "Kennedy, you wince whenever I get. It's not important because your body already knows what it wants. Signifies everything." She moved closer. "You can want me." "She released you." She asked. "It's not about ownership, is it?" "She doesn't have the right to own you now." She lowered her voice. "So why do you keep staring at me as if this is incorrect? You're her half-sister. The blood is different." But she leaned over to, "You think I don't know what Jordan did to you? But I saw it happen." She lowered her voice and adjusted the barbell's plates. "She never once spent any time near my throat, yet you split yourself in two in an attempt to be what she required." "Closed," she agreed. "But I know you loved her more. You don't know everything." She glanced up into her eyes and knew how to embrace. "I know you deserve better." Blazing. I wasn't sure how to respond to that. "You deserve to be wanted loudly." Since I had been trying for months to hide the fact that we lifted together, and it wasn't simply the truth. Deadlifts, cable rows, and core circuits. She maintained a sufficient distance to be courteous, but whenever she saw me, she was close enough to make me wild. Every time I reached for the lower back, ribs, or hips, my fingers disappeared. Weights. I could feel her gaze on me, and by the end of the hour, I was shaking for no apparent reason. She said, "I won't touch you," without asking Scarlet. As we stretched, responded, "Unless you want me to," and we sat across from each other on the mats. Keeping my eyes on the ground, I slowly folded my arms forward and extended them overhead. I responded, "Probably, and Jordan will ultimately find out. She will lose." Scarlett's voice was low and certain, and she probably thought, "You're okay with that." Kennedy. I've never lived in her shadow, and I'm not going to start right now. Switched. She leaned forward till our conversation began. "This isn't just a game for you. If it had been, I would have chosen someone more easily. I don't want to shatter you. I want to watch what happens when someone eventually gives you support." Her faces were inches apart. For a moment, I swear I forgot my own name when my breath brushed my lips. But I stood there, heart racing, without kissing her. I had to leave, Kennedy, but not just now. She simply watched me instead of following me. And in some ways it made it worse because she was waiting, not pressing. And I paced my apartment that night instead of sleeping. I played the voicemail Scarlett left me months ago on my phone, and browsed through old texts from Jordan that I should have deleted. Day that I never responded to, "Hey, you're probably not going to hear this, but I always admired you, even when you were hers. I hope all is well with you. One day, even if it's not me, you'll let someone to make you happy." So I removed it. I sobbed before waking up the following morning and returning to the gym because I was exhausted, of being scared of what I desired. And when I entered, Scarlett was already watching me from the free weights. I knew I wasn't ready to kiss her yet, but I was done acting that way because of that slow-burning smile. When I initially entered the gym and saw Scarlett, my first reaction was, should have felt wrong. I had noticed her waiting for me near the squat rack, stretching idly and tilting her head back, exposing her throat, that nonchalant, sensual, untouchable expression on girls before. But on Scarlett, it made She looked up as I walked up to her and grinned like if we already knew a secret, and my breath caught like I had swallowed a spark. "I told you the soreness gets addictive, and I'm not here for it," she added, adding that the other people in the room didn't deserve to know again. "I'm here to forget I mumbled in sorrow. She moved closer and spoke. "It's weird because whenever you gaze at me, you recall everything I didn't even try to dispute with Scarlett when she set up our station as if it were standard procedure, which I disliked more than the fact that she was correct. Throwing me a towel and readjusting the weights and checking the clips as if we've been doing this for weeks rather than 2. Barely constrained encounters. We synced her while sweating profusely and working through a vicious lower body set. More people were watching me than the barbell, and as I leaned down for the last deadlift, I could feel my fingers curling under the weight. She said, "Keep your chest open," as she stepped behind me closer than normal. Her hands disappeared around my waist, grazing the contour with her fingers. I gently stood with my hip looking into the mirror, and our reflections appeared to something in a dream that shouldn't have made me shaky and flushed. Her calm, steady mouth opened slightly as if she wanted to speak. She said, "You felt strong. I feel like I'm..." But she wasn't sure how that one looked good. She nodded toward the bench next to me and said, "I'm going to collapse. Then sit. You don't have to look after me," she said, kneeling in front of me and unwinding my wrist strap, as if she had done it 100 times. I gulped hard and continued, "Maybe I want to." "Why? Because I like you. You hardly..." "Kennedy, you know me," she said, glancing up. "I observed you for 2 years and saw how you defended her and your attempts to win her love. I saw you fade, and now I want to see you flourish." Seems so simple, but it's not. Her fingers tensed a little, but it was worthwhile. Glanced down at her, who had a bead of sweat streaming down her face from the workout. Her lips were so close to her temple that I should have moved. Instead of standing, I put my hand in her hair, and she didn't pull away. She leaned in and her breath struck my knee, whispering, "Say anything. Tell me not to." I answered, "Because I want you to." And in the next moment, her hands were on my thighs. She rose slowly, her eyes never leaving, and she was not demanding at all, simply there and solid. Mine, and it wasn't kind or courteous when our lips touched. Instead, it was the result of weeks of tension, months of denial, and years of an unsaid thing exploding through the... She kissed me as if she had been considering it since our first meeting, as if there were a wave of distance between us. I kissed her back as though I didn't care about the burden of the past or the mess it would create. "Didn't you?" We only split up when we heard someone pounding weights and returned to the fluorescent lit. We were still standing in Scarlet, blinking and breathing shallowly. Perhaps we... Yes, I did say locker room, but neither men's nor women's came with me. I pulled her in the direction of the dimly lit, empty hallway leading to the private stretch studio. The door behind her snapped shut. She looked at me, still gasping for air, and said, "Are you all right?" "No," I muttered. She moved closer and suddenly stopped acting as though she didn't want you, saying, "But I'm done pretending I don't want you." Her hand crept under my shirt. My mouth found her neck, slightly below her. As I traced the skin at my sides, we kissed like if it had always been coming, with her pulse fluttering in her jaw. And as she pulled, with my hands entangled in my shirt, I dropped on the mat and forgot about anything else. Scarlett's mouth, breath, and body were the only things that were real. Jordan didn't exist, and the rules didn't matter. We didn't go all the way, but they were crushed against mine in a beat that sounded like a cross between prayer and resistance. However, when we eventually laid side by side, it felt as though we had breathless and trembling fingers linked. It was about surrender, not sex, I muttered. "This is crazy," she probably answered, grinning at the ceiling. I looked, and if we don't care, she's probably going to kill us after getting found. I stared closely at her and realized for the first time that I wasn't scared of Jordan any longer. I was terrified of how much I was becoming to feel about someone who treated me as like I were superior to the... Scarlett went out and gently touched my face, saying, "You're permitted to start over," she said. "Even if it's with me," I said, my voice breaking. "Especially if it's with you." Went home that evening, and when I woke up the following morning, I saw her mouth close to my ear and her arm wrapped around my waist. Anything risky, I was falling for Scarlett and wasn't attempting to move on from Jordan. We didn't discuss what occurred on the mat, but not initially. Scarlett kissed my shoulder the following morning as if it were the most natural thing, and I agreed, still in a haze, when the world offered me a protein bar and asked if I wanted to meet later for smoothies and core work. My heart continued to pound in a rhythm I didn't understand, and it seemed risky. Peace felt like a burning beneath my skin. But I reminded myself that we had time to figure it out. It's time to have a conversation and clarify what this was before anyone notices. Should have seen that time wasn't on our side. 2 days later, I arrived at the gym late because I was preoccupied and still tasted her on my lips from the previous evening and went directly into Jordan. She was chatting with someone behind the reception counter. She was drinking from a water bottle as if she owned the whole place, and her hair had grown shorter, messier, as if she had given up on perfection the day she left my life. Our gazes locked, and the atmosphere between, Kennedy said, we dropped 5 degrees, with no warmth in her voice. "Didn't I expected to see you here?" "Well, people do change." Her eyes strayed past my Scarlett, she said next, so I didn't have to turn to see who was behind me. "Nice to see you too." Jordan Scarlett. Her body language was light, but her voice was tense. "I sensed the chill surge as you worked, shifting just enough to put distance between us," Jordan asked, tilting his head. "We've been out together, and I didn't realize you two were close." Scarlett reconnected, saying, "I wanted to run. I wanted to dissolve into the floor and vanish," but Jordan hadn't finished. "Is that what we're referring to?" I inquired because I'm having memories of the time you were 16 and stole my makeup to win her over at that school dance. I remarked, "That's not fair." And she snapped. "You really couldn't?" she said. "Find someone else, Kennedy. Besides, my sister, who ended our relationship, doesn't make this acceptable." Why? I was trembling because it made you uncomfortable. Jordan took a cautious step, not out of remorse, but rather because of the weight of all she was attempting to reimpose on me. Scarlett moved up and said, "You are mine. She is not a property. Stay away." Scarlett answered in a firm voice, "No, you don't have the right to leave her this time and then act as like you own her. You have no idea what we had. See what you lost." Jordan blinked again before letting out a chilly, sour laugh. The sound reverberated over the gym floor. "Well," she replied, her eyes darting between us, "this is going to be enjoyable to tell Mom." She went before any of us could say anything, leaving a void in her wake. Was so loud that I pressed my breast into Scarlett's. "We should have been more careful." "I'm not sorry," she said. "Are you?" When my mind was racing into every possible scenario, I didn't respond with couldn't not. Potential outcome of the family conflict that whispered judgments about her. "We can't do this in public anymore," I said, referring to her friends betraying her and picking sides. Worse, her expression changed. "So what if we resume acting like strangers, just until it cools down?" "No," she responded in a monotone voice. "I'm not moving into hiding once more." Scarlett. "No, I saw you squirm for Jordan, and I saw you vanish into the," she said. "I'm not going to be your shadow too. I'm just a version of you that wouldn't make her uncomfortable. More than I anticipated. Isn't that what I'm doing?" She inquired when things got tough, you cringed. So I said, "I'm trying to protect you." I didn't say anything out loud, but I felt the sorrow right away, echo the heat. "I'm attempting to defend the one thing that feels good," I said in a whisper. After months, her voice broke and she stopped shoving me away. So I took a seat on the bench. "I don't know how to do this, so I'm holding my face in my hands." "You don't have to," she replied, kneeling in. "You really must gaze up in front of me." Her eyes were hazy, yet angry. My voice was hardly heard. So I continued, "Then stop acting like we're something you need to apologize for." "What if I lose?" She also reached up and caressed my jaw before fighting harder. But I didn't kiss her. I kept her hand and didn't let go while she wasn't looking at us. Someone passed by that evening, and a message from Jordan appeared on my phone. "Two deserve each other." I deleted it without responding. Then I looked at Scarlett. The repercussions came quickly when she nestled up against me in bed and said, "Stay." The quiet on my phone the day following the altercation with Jordan wasn't calm. Rather, it was pressure. Friends stopped texting. People who used to nod at me in the gym began to act as though they didn't see me. One of my favorite trainers glanced between me and, before leaving without saying anything, Scarlett lifted his eyebrows and said, "Judgment moves in quiet waves. No one says it out loud, but you can sense it. It eases the tension and shows how people minimize you." Scarlett feigned not to notice with looks and incomplete remarks, but I recognized it by the way she stood a little more rigidly, and the way her gaze was fixed on. She told me, "This is temporary. When some of the females we knew passed us at the smoothie bar without saying hello, they'll become bored. I don't care if they don't." I replied, "I'm just not used to being observed." "Kennedy, you've always been observed," she remarked, stroking her. I squeezed my thumb over the back of my hand and said, "You're just not used to being seen." I was at a loss for words, her fingers, and turned away. When she visited that evening, we didn't discuss Jordan, the notes I have yet to read, or the manner in which her mother sent her before Scarlett could hit play. I erased the voice note. We made pasta and danced barefoot in my kitchen, and intentionally, since she mentioned that she wanted to see me giggle uncontrollably once more. I did. She kissed me as though we had endless time, as if nothing else mattered, and we weren't hurried when we finally got into my bed, about choosing to flee. It was about her slow, attentive fingers on my flesh, discovering how her mouth moved with mine as if we had years to get to know one another, and perhaps we would. But it was enough that night to feel her weight above me, her name on my lips, and her unsteady breath in my. She broke her voice and replied, "Tell me you mean it." In response to my murmur that I didn't want anybody else to hear it, I pulled her down and whispered, "It's not only about her. You are constantly more dangerous than she ever was." She gave me a gentle smile before ruining me. I did it carefully, and we remained encircled till the dawn when our limbs became entwined. She dozed off on all that was sticky with sweat and tenderness, her heart thumping. I remained motionless on my chest until the sun hit her shoulder, at which point I realized that going to get more difficult. But I also realized that I was no longer running, walked to Jordan's apartment, where I used to live, instead of going to the gym that day. She wasn't expecting me. "Wow," she remarked, opening the door barefoot and sporting one of the big hoodies I used to pilfer when we were together, withdrawing the bravery to arrive now and declare, "I'm not here to fight. So why are you present?" Her face remained unchanged as she said, "To tell you I'm not sorry. You should, because you left me." I continued, "I let you go. I didn't plead or pursue you. I believed that was what love meant when I broke silently. But now I realize that you believe Scarlett loves you, but it doesn't make you smaller or beg you to vanish." I said, "I think she sees me, and I never felt seen with you." I watched. You know what pains her? Her shoulders tense, and her mouth opens and closes again. Stated, "It feels intentional that you moved on to her. Not that you moved on, but perhaps it was unavoidably," she said. "Do you love her?" I hesitated, then nodded, thinking I could. Then, before I could say anything that we both regret, she added, "I left her." When I unlocked the door to my own flat, I felt lighter in my chest despite the tears in my eyes. Discovered Scarlett wearing one of my old college t-shirts, sitting on my couch, staring up at me as if I were something worth waiting for, because I was certain that I had made the right decision. "You okay?" she said. "Yeah," I replied. "Now I am." She approached me, put her hands on my shoulders, and said, "Tell that you want this," she asked me again. "I want this," I muttered. "Desire you?" I then gave her a kiss as if it were a final, genuine pledge. And blazing. We weren't safe or easy, but we were sincere. And for Scarlett began leaving things at my house for the first time in a long time. And it was enough. At first, it was small items like hair. It was her favorite hoodie, followed by ties, an extra toothbrush, and a pair of leggings wrapped neatly over the back of my chair. I didn't ask her to bring the one that always had the sleeves pushed up beyond her elbows and smelled like her skin. It didn't feel like a line was being crossed, but she didn't ask if she could. We settled into a rhythm that felt like a door opening, and I didn't want it to close. Coffee and soft kisses filled the mornings, and her touch on my back meant more to me in the gym in the afternoons than anything else. She mocked them about their poor TV and their evenings spent curled up in bed or spread out on the couch with takeout containers. Every time I blinked a bit too long when she smiled, I called her trouble, and she persistently dubbed me a softie. When she pretended to reach for the remote, her fingers would occasionally slide under the hem of my shirt. But it wasn't all easy on sometimes. I saw her clenching her jaw while staring at her phone. Her mother had unfollowed her on all social media and hadn't phoned Jordan yet. Her childhood friends were suddenly too. I wanted to correct it and say something that would improve it, but I was too busy to meet up. Even though she claimed not to be hungry, I prepared her favorite breakfast there. I held her hand in the grocery store and even dragged her to the park when the walls of my apartment felt too small. She never urged me to go when people stared, but she also never let go. One evening, in my small bathroom, we were brushing our teeth side by side while barefoot when she turned to face me, her lips still covered in foam. I chuckled as I said, "This feels weirdly domestic." "Should I be worried?" She spit into the basin and claimed to be the person who left your shampoo in my shower. "That was strategic," she remarked. Before I could stop myself, I said, "You already claimed me." paused for a moment, then grinned. Good. I hate playing fair. We spent that evening together. She enjoyed falling as we were tangled beneath the blankets, her head resting on my chest and my fingers creating patterns on her spine. I felt needed and I fell asleep like that. Skin to skin, heart to heart. Had not felt needed in a while, but despite our tenderness, there were still times when the weight of our activities weighed heavily on my chest, much like when someone mumbled homewrecker at the gym. Their breath as we went by, similar to how the room became silent when Jordan's name appeared in a shared group chat. Or when I attempted to remain strong as I saw Scarlett's face briefly break before she smiled as if nothing had occurred. I made an effort to act indifferent, but when she was asleep late at night and the outside world became too noisy, I'd wonder how long we could continue to vacillate between what seemed right and what felt wrong. Everyone else. Then she would murmur, "You're thinking," while stirring eyes still thick with slumber. Too loud once more. And I would give her a forehead kiss and tell her, "No, just listening to your heartbeat." I would hold her while she smiled, already slipping back into her dreams, as though it would keep the world at bay. One Sunday morning, we made the decision to brave breakfast outside a small cafe on the corner. Her hand, seemingly instinctively, sought mine across the table. When a voice from behind us sliced through the moment like a razor, we were giggling uncontrollably. "Wow, you two truly don't." We both turned, and it was one of Jordan's old pals, Miranda who noticed. Scarlett stood up first, and Calm's look was a jumble of smugness and astonishment. Calm, but I could see that she was tense in her neck. "Did you need anything?" Miranda stated that she's not a rebound, and that she was only curious how long it would take you to blow apart your family. My breath caught Miranda rolling as Scarlett remarked, "She's a miracle." Her eyes and left, muttering something that neither of us heard. We sat down again, and I couldn't end the stillness. "You okay?" Trembling, Scarlett extended for my hand once again. "Yeah," I replied, "but that was awful." "Yes," she repeated. "It did." We didn't consume all of our food, but we strolled home together that evening. In the dark, I muttered, "Why are you still after everything? Are you doing this with me?" She raised herself on one elbow, looking down at me as if the answer was clear, since I'm not pursuing someone who doesn't want me for the first time. "I want to fall with you even though I'm simply falling and not proving anything." Gripped her face, drew her down, and gave her a kiss, as if she were the last thing remaining in the world that made sense. And perhaps she was. That evening, we made love without urgency, just two individuals. Heat, honesty, and no explosions or desperation. Choose each other repeatedly, even when things got tough, especially when I dozed off holding her hand over my heart, her name on my lips, and I didn't see Jordan's in my dream. Scarlett's smiling face caught my attention as she extended her hand and drew me in. It at last felt like home. It began with a single line of text from my mom. Is it true that I gazed at the screen as though the letters may change their position to become less sharp and more softer? In the end, I didn't respond because I didn't know, not because I didn't want to. Scarlett remained in bed, snuggled in my comforter, as if it were her own, face directed toward the sun peeking through the slats, hair disheveled, calm as. I loved her and I envied her. That knowledge came to me gradually. I loved her not only for her physique, but also for her bright mind. Wave was soft but unstoppable, tongue and gentler kisses, and I adored the way she treated me as though I were important, saw me, and I was certain that loving her in private would no longer be sufficient. That evening, we went to a restaurant for supper, not takeout or smoothies after working out. Candlelight, she entered my living room wearing a black dress and scarlet lipstick, and I was overcome with emotion. You look like you've seen a ghost." "Okay," she questioned. Just someone I never imagined that I would be permitted to see her smile falter just a little. "You don't must be permitted, you just must desire it." I grabbed her hand and said, "I want you." The loud couples were everywhere in the busy restaurant, and I knew it was reckless. I held onto her hand the entire time, even though I knew that being out like this would spread more quickly than wildfire. When she leant over the table and gave me a gentle kiss, which I returned as if no one else was looking. The following morning, the internet erupted. Someone had snapped a grainy, blurry picture, and it wasn't even a good one, from behind, but Jordan's sister and ex-boyfriend cuddling up at Arlo's final. The caption made me want to throw something, but the responses were much worse. "I suppose that blood isn't thicker than thirst." Scarlett always desired what Jordan had, and Kennedy is a snake who is the most supportive and vicious. After that, I avoided using my phone because I was desperate, sloppy, and predictable, but Scarlett didn't. And I could sense the fury behind her eyes when I discovered her on the couch, scrolling through the fallout. I know," she continued. "It's getting ugly. My mother called me, and I felt sick to my stomach. Said she questioned me about if I was punishing Jordan. What did you say, she said? Glanced at me, and then without blinking, I informed her that I was doing it since I had at last discovered someone who gave me a sense of worth picking, Scarlett remarked as she hung up on me, and I gulped hard. Didn't break, but I could hear every word that was not spoken. I apologize, but I went on my knees in front of her and took her and my hands. Every time I put my forehead on hers, she muttered, I do it again. She drew back just enough to give me a glance. So let's quit acting like this can be halfway. Are you? Yes, without a doubt, even if it means losing individuals or creating a new world with you from the beginning. She gave me a kiss and then became fiercely persuaded that we were making a verbal decision that afternoon. We returned to the gym together, entering while holding hands, refused to flinch. People gazed, of course, but nobody spoke that day, and I wouldn't have cared even if they had. We passed past the area, if it was ours, as if we had earned it. Later that evening, I shared a picture of nothing obscene, simply our hands and fingers intertwined as we kissed. The first message came from the gym bench, which had no caption or explanation, just the facts. An old buddy expressed pride in you, followed by another who showed courage and respect. And finally, Jordan, whose name I hadn't seen in days, sent me a brief note. It took you long enough. I closed the program, turned to Scarlett, and grinned without responding. Even though I had no idea what that meant, I responded, workout or war, and she grinned. Ready for round 2. She chuckled. God, how she laughed. And I realized at that moment that we would make it through everything because we stopped playing pretend and started making decisions aloud. Not exactly, but they also didn't fit together once we went public. It resembled going through a house after a hurricane. The building itself was intact, but everything within had changed. Some remained silent, some unfollowed, and some contacted my mother, called 2 days after the post, asking whether I was all right. I replied. Scarlett made me laugh more than anyone else ever did. I told her. She said, good that's. After a lengthy pause on the other end of the telephone, all that counts. It didn't seem like acceptance, but it also wasn't rejection. The gym remained strange, and Scarlett's mother didn't contact Jordan or say anything else. Initially, it was too quiet when we entered and too noisy when we exited. But gradually, even yet, the tension subsided as people grew weary of chatting, and we resumed breathing when they stopped observing. Scarlett officially moved in without any of us mentioning her belongings, just never left. Her key remained in the bowl by the door, and before I knew it, her name was stored as home on my phone. I had done it, and we didn't require labels since what we had was genuine. When she was half asleep, she reached for me, and I was able to recall her coffee order more clearly than I could. She seemed curious, hungry, and in awe of me that night when it rained, as if I were something she was still discovering. Gentle drizzle, not the kind of rain seen in a love film that flowed in sheets against the windows. We stayed there until the thunder sounded thick and low, like the sky was breathing above us, watching the storm while snuggled up on the couch with her in my hoodie and me in her lap. You ever think we weren't supposed to happen? I questioned, as if it may reveal a secret. She brushed her fingers through my hair constantly, and I'm so happy we did. In any case, I leaned back, just, Jordan, you don't miss her. She replied, no, I miss the thought of, she is the one I created as a child, but you are real and not just a concept. Sometimes I murmured in a whisper, you don't scare me. And she responded, you ground my heart. She responded without hesitation when I remarked, you love me, without asking a question. You have awful timing. I believe I always did, even when I wasn't supposed to. You're worth a mess. I gave her a gentle, familiar kiss. Yet something, the weight of those 3 words, the rain, and the silence changed the atmosphere between us. Her fingers found she drew me into her slow, reverent waist while mine entwined in the back of her shirt. Her legs and lap were completely encircling me, lips all over my jaw, neck and collarbone stripped all the way down to the flesh. And I want and trust her. Took me to bed as if I were a priceless item. And this time, when we made contact, worship was more than just heat. There was tenderness in each arch and every gasp, every word she muttered, the way she gazed at me as she pressed against me, like if I were the only thing she had ever. I cried not out of grief, but rather from relief after praying for and eventually being able to hold. How wonderful it was to be noticed, cared for, and loved without having to say sorry. She kissed my face was filled with silent tears that made me feel everything when we descended from. She buried her face in my breast, breathless, and nodded, and muttered, you're safe with me. I trusted her. I didn't recoil for the first time in years when someone approached too closely because she stayed. And we laid in the lazy circles are being drawn on my stomach by the calm thunder that is still booming outside her thumb. She questioned, you ever think about what happens next? And I always nodded. She grinned against my skin. And I don't know, but I know I want you in it. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. That night, we didn't get any sleep. Because of the storm. Because you don't want to. When you finally find something genuine after all the turmoil and suffering. I believed we were over the murmurs, the judgment, and the what the hell? Close your eyes and miss a moment. I believed we had weathered the worst of it. And perhaps we did. But recovery doesn't always imply. Scarlet. It happened on a Wednesday. Peace and forgetting have a tendency of being broken just when you begin to trust them. My hoodie was hanging off her body as if it belonged there, and she had just gone for class with her hair still moist from the shower, told me she would pick up groceries on the way back, and kissed my cheek. I instructed her to get the expensive granola she professes to despise, yet always completes the task. It felt like a typical day until 20. I was surprised when someone knocked on my door a few minutes later, and when I opened it, Jordan was there, eyes inscrutable, hands in her jacket pockets, my heart slamming into my "Hey," she murmured, as if we were still something that made sense. And her ribs seemed to be warning me. Jordan, didn't move. I just needed to see you by myself. What are you doing here? Hesitated, but the edge of something unsaid was raw on her face. Forced me to move aside as she entered as if her body still recognized the space's arrangement. She didn't sit down, and neither did I. So I remarked, "This isn't a good idea." "I know. Then why are you?" She continued in a strained voice. "You're here because I keep waking up thinking this is some sort of fever dream. I used to follow my sister around the house in my shoes, but she's not a child no more," she added, laughing bitterly as I realized I had crossed my arms. Jordan, close your answers. "I'm not sure what you want from me. It's been months. I still feel it. Though, even if you left me." "No, you didn't. You simply..." That touched her, and she flinched. "You're correct. I wasn't sure how. You didn't think your sister could love you the way you deserved. But I didn't think you'd find someone who could. I thought she wouldn't want to. So I asked in a stronger voice now since I wasn't. I'm too good for her. But good enough for you?" She snapped because she's impulsive, because she is careless with people and ruins stuff. I firmly answered. She's more cautious with me than you ever were. Her shoulders plummeted, and she appeared broken for a moment. "Does it ever feel wrong?" As I woke up next her, I inquired what we had, and I continued gently, was and agonizing. Yet my relationship with her is sincere, genuine, and developing. I won't apologize for that. I didn't come here to apologize. Then, why did you come to bid me farewell? Stated honestly this time. Why now? Since I think I've finally come to understand that you're hers now, and perhaps you should have been hers all along. Turned and hesitantly made his way to the door. Take care of her. She's more delicate than she revealed. Am I asked, and she nodded before leaving. I stood there for heart-pounding body for a long period. And an hour later, Scarlett returned home. She was singing to herself while clutching a grocery bag. So I put my arms around her as if she may vanish if I didn't. She said, "Hey," in amazement. "What's going on?" as she passed her body still. "Jordan," I said, nodding. She bid me farewell, and Scarlett leaned back slightly to look into my face. "And tell me how you feel about me starting afresh in real life at last." Kissed me deeply and slowly, and when she withdrew, she muttered, "Then let's begin here." That evening, we lit candles, switched off our phones, and aloud. When I stared at her, nothing about it felt real, and the world seemed to shrink to the size of our bed and the warmth of our skin. It was the small details that informed me that we had succeeded. Some significant event with speeches, rings, or dramatic announcements while the sun was setting, but the small details that crept into the way Scarlett grabbed for me in the middle of our daily lives and knitted themselves into something permanent, the way our toothbrushes slanted, and the way her shoes were always at the door next to mine in the morning without opening her eyes. It was late May that she said, not "I love you," as if they had given up acting as though they weren't together. The words felt like they had already been said. Gasped and breathed into each other's skins so many times. Prayer, no. This was different. We were in the park, lying on a blanket, my head on her tummy, the sun scorching and humid, her fingers drawing languid lines. She had placed iced coffee on my arm, left the napkins there, and kissed the whipped cream off my lip in front of, without a doubt, everyone. I had never been so publicly touched before. Squinting at the sky, she replied, "I never wanted to be until her." I blinked and said, "We should move. Get a home together that is larger than here." I sat up, thinking, a real closet instead of that small IKEA shelf you pretend is furniture. "I want to spend my mornings with you, leaning on one elbow and keeping my eyes fixed on yours. I want a genuine kitchen with shelves for all the books you store beneath the bed, and plants you won't remember to water. Home to you. And no, I'm not merely stopping by, I'm living it. My chest hurts in the best approach, since you're already in it. Let's take complete ownership of it. I wouldn't have been able to imagine panicking 2 years ago, let alone 6 months ago. At midnight, I woke up without her breath on the back of my neck, and without her texts about memes and protein bars. Couldn't fathom living without her in every room, every idea, and every plan. All right, I said, let's do it. She smiled, rolled over, and gave me a passionate kiss, enough to forget we were out in public. A month later, we relocated to a 2-bedroom apartment we feel like adults without breaking the money, thanks to the large windows, creaking flooring, and just the right amount of character. After arguing over color swatches and painting the walls together, they danced barefoot on drop cloths and ended up coated in specks of. In the corridor, she displayed a picture of us that was blue, gray, and soft green. One of the first, we went out in public, both of us flushed and sweating after our workout. She claimed that my hair was the most beautiful I had ever been, but I detested how untidy it appeared and laughed into the camera. That first, we ordered pizza and drank inexpensive wine on our first night at the new apartment without unpacking. On the floor, kissed as if it were our first time, and laughed as the clothes peeled off in between the slices. Fingers curling into my thigh, mouth against mine, as if she couldn't believe I was. She breathed in and out, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me. And you know that." "Yes," I said, but repeat it anyhow. She grinned and planted a kiss on my throat. "You are the finest part was that we made love that night, as if it were a vow. It was slow and full of." She said, "I see you, I want you, I'm not going anywhere." Things into my ear that I was unaware I needed, and I responded with the gasp and my hands and lips. I never felt safer when I heard the words of 2 people who had everything to offer and nothing to prove. Felt more like herself as she stood by the window drinking coffee in the morning, sunlight streaming down her naked back. She turned when she saw me observing her, grinning. "We did it," as one of my shirts hung loosely over her body. Answered, "Yeah." And I replied, "We did." After that, we didn't discuss Jordan much, not because we were trying to avoid it, but rather because we had run out of things to say. She had gone her way, we had gone ours, and something lovely had somehow taken root in the midst of that unachievable tangle, and Scarlett's mother finally arrived. Around with an uncomfortable dinner and a somber conversation, not with flowers or heartfelt apologies. Acknowledgement that perhaps this wasn't a passing phase, but rather something genuine, and that God was responsible for the months and seasons that passed. Changed, she got promoted. I started writing, and we hosted friends during the holidays. We laughed until we started crying and burned cookies. Once more, we had a cat that detested everyone but herself. We occasionally got into arguments regarding the timetable of dishes and her refusal to charge her phone. Yet we consistently returned, always picked one another. One evening, after a long day, she curled up on the couch. I kissed her like if she were at home, and she turned to face me and said, "You know, I never imagined falling in love would feel like this. The truth is that you're home." She was more than my ex's sister. She was my heart, my warmth, my haven, and the girl who first noticed my squats and flirted with me as if it were a challenge. Starting, and I knew we would, as she drew me into her lap and planted a kiss on my lips, as if we had an eternity to get it right. Because, loud and clear, this was love, not a rebound or retaliation. Genuine ours. We sincerely appreciate your support, whether it be through liking. You make all the difference on this channel by leaving a comment, sharing, or emailing a heartfelt thank you. See you in the next